Hey, welcome to Manalizing. This is where men talk about the kind of stuff that men don't talk about. Put your hard hat on, get ready for a ride. Here we go.
And he was breathing, but it was like a very weird, almost like a snoring sound. And I immediately knew something was wrong.
Hey, welcome to Manalizing. I'm Garth Haslam. In this interview, I'm interviewing Choco Fairbanks. Choco is a woman who just had her husband pass, and it's been predictably hard for her. She had a great marriage. So the question comes up for me. I think we all know someone or are close to someone who's had a spouse pass or a child pass or someone very close to them. And it's like, what do you do? What do you talk about? Do you bring it up? Do you not bring it up? Do you try and pretend they never existed? Do you try to be support? What does support look like? I asked Choco those questions, and she answered them very kindly and with a lot of grace. And here's the interview. Welcome to Manalizing, where men and sometimes women talk about things that men and sometimes women don't talk about. I'm Garth Haslam, and we have Choco Fairbanks. I know you so well that I just barely had to ask your last name from you. We
Feels
met.
like we've known each other forever.
Yeah, forever. She is kind of one of the, you run into some people and you just know they're awesome. And that's kind of where it landed with you. And that's why I asked you to be on this podcast. Last I checked, you don't look much like a man. But you have a story that I think a lot of men can identify with, and one that everybody needs to hear. Men, women, sideways, horses, everybody needs to hear this one. And I only talked to you for about 5 minutes that day, but I could tell enough to know that you run deep and that you have a story to tell, and that it's one that you have a lot to give to all of us. So that's a lot of speech by me. Let's have everybody get to know you. Tell me who you are, what you do, what entertains you, why you like your hairstyle. I know why I choose mine, but that's a different matter.
Sure. Oh, that was a large order. My name's Choco Fairbanks. I did grow up in Utah. I left for about 20 years and just recently came back.
You lived in Utah for a while. You left. Where did you go and why did you come back?
I left shortly after high school. I should say I left Salt Lake shortly after high school. I did go to the University of Utah, but I lived in Park City for during that. And then just as soon as I graduated, I was out of here. I just needed to see the world. And I did end up landing in California for a long time and then Tennessee. And I swore I'm was just going to keep moving on. And then my husband passed away 9 months ago. And just after 3 months of being alone in the house, we had just recently moved to Tennessee and I didn't have friends or family there. Decided probably the best thing for me was just to come back to my roots.
You went to Cali first. What
Yeah.
part? Southern, northern?
Sure. Southern. So I lived in the Los Angeles area for about 20 years. Owned different companies from marketing and production down to an online farmers market. So it was an exciting place to be. It's an exciting place to be an entrepreneur, but it can also be a tough place to live. So wasn't what I wanted for my life long term, but it was great for the time I was there.
So you went from SoCal to Tennessee, which is just a little bit different than Southern California.
Yeah.
Why?
That was a project. So I had bought a house up in the Smoky Mountains that we were going to remodel. It was a really cool house, like up in the mountains. Saw bears every day, and so that was like a big remodel that we were working on. So I had only been in. I think I only ended up spending about 9 months in Tennessee, so it was not like a long term home
When
for me.
when I met you what, couple of weeks ago, 10 days ago,
Mm,
you said something that actually that kind of floored me. We were talking about the attic in above your main floor,
mhm.
and there was none because it was a very small attic. There was probably, just a few inches between the top and bottom chords of what
Yeah.
the attic may have been. But you go, yeah, it's not a big deal to open up the sheetrock. Let's do it now. And I'm like, what? Who is this woman?
Yeah, just cut a hole in it. I'll be fine.
I don't. I run into contractors who don't want to do that. Maybe
Yeah,
you
I
are a con.
mean, I'm slightly handy. I have remodeled a few homes, so I decided to start like buying little rental properties, and I'd buy like an old house and convert it, remodel it, and rent it out. So I started doing that like the last maybe 7 years. I mean, I started out not knowing a thing,
Yeah.
and just have learned a ton. And then the last one I did in Tennessee was like major remodel. And I ended up having to do a lot of the work myself. So I am not a pro, but it is cool to learn. It's cool to be able to like know how to do it.
Yeah.
So
Before I got dedicated to being just the structural engineer that goes to houses, I was the home inspector for 25 years. And, it was always fun for me to notice who would get on the roof with me, for example, and who wanted to
mhm.
go into the attic. There was one instance where a dude he went up in the attic with me and then he walked across the floor like it was a floor. I'm like, dude, that's sheetrock. And if you
Did he punch
miss,
through?
he was lucky to stay alive that day. And then just barely I had another lady, not you, but I was going down in a crawl space, and it was a crawl space, not one of those 5 or 6 foot depth ones. So I was pushing aside the spiders and cursing my life left and right with each spider web that I moved. And she goes, yeah, I want to go down there with you. And I'm like, okay. So yeah, more power to you guys. There is nothing that you guys can't do. I guess it's kind of like us men. We limit ourselves in many ways because somebody told us when we were growing up that we can't or shouldn't or wouldn't, and not true. You
Yeah,
have just as much ability to crawl into an attic as I have of learning how to braid hair,
true.
just not my own. So you're in Tennessee for 9 months, and tell me how that goes down with your husband.
Sure. He, I mean, he was helping me a ton with the remodel, but also traveling quite a bit for his own personal work. So, those 9 months that we were in Tennessee, we probably only were together like half the time.
Uh-huh.
And then I was getting really close to being done with the remodel, and we probably only had about a week left, if
Uh-huh.
that, just a few days left on the remodel. And he had been gone for about 3 weeks, which was probably the longest stint he had spent away. Came home, had been home for about 2 weeks. And as we were wrapping up, we were working on the house. Actually, he was cutting down a tree. He was very excited. I had just like bought him a new chainsaw,
Oh, that's
and
a good toy.
I was working in the garage, switching out all the outlets to new ones. And I heard the chainsaw stop, and he kind of like screamed. So I thought, oh no, what happened? So I ran out there, and the tree had like fallen on the pergola, and it was fine. I had just kind of like leaned over. But I went up the stairs to help him, and he must have been feeling lightheaded. He had told me like if I ever faint, which has happened before. He said, just put my feet on a chair for, I don't know what that does, but so he must have felt lightheaded, and because he'd pulled a chair over and was laying on the ground with his feet on the chair. And he was breathing, but it was like a very weird, almost like a snoring sound. And I immediately knew something was wrong because when he has passed out, fainted in the couple times in the past due to like blood clots, it was just for a couple seconds. Um, so I ran back to the garage and called, and sadly, I have video of all of this because of the Ring cameras going on. So I like have watched them a million times, knowing what was happening at like minute by minute. But so I called 911, and they talked me through CPR, and it just, I just like was so fast, everything that had happened. Even though we were really high up in the Smokies, or up in the mountains, they got there pretty fast. They got there within 9 minutes of me calling. I feel like that's pretty fast for how far out we lived. And I will say, like, I know everything was done to help him. I mean, they did the paddles, they used 4 EpiPens. Um, I mean, it was incredible. There were 4 people working on him. I mean, they sent like 2 ambulances. Like they were staffed and ready to help. And then they got him in the ambulance. They didn't get him breathing again, but for some reason, I felt like they're here, everything's going to be fine. Like they got him.
Mhm.
So I even grabbed, because we were like so gross from working construction. So, because they told me to drive my own car to the hospital. So I even grabbed like a spare clean clothes, because I was like going to be at the hospital for a long time,
Right.
like I was in it. They had him. We were like, that was it. We are going to be at the hospital for a long time. So, but then I showed up at the hospital, and um I mean, I was probably there for only like 20, 30 minutes. Like it just is this crazy thing. Like you show up and you're ready. There was nothing they could do when he even arrived. So, I got there, and I mean, they were so great with me. The doctor actually like got down on his knees and held my hands and told me the EMTs did, everything they could, but there was nothing that they could do once he reached the hospital. Um, and so it was just like in minutes, our whole world, like it's just everything stopped, it was like, and then it's, you're just lost because, or in that moment, like, after he had passed and I like signed the papers, um, I turned to the head nurse, and I said, what am I supposed to do right now? And she said, you've done everything. You've signed everything. Um, you need to pick a mortuary. And she gave me a list of people to call, and she's like, you can go home now.
I don't think that's what you meant when you asked that question.
Yeah, it's just the whole world turned upside down in that moment. And we also were in a unique our life was in a unique place because we had just spent the last year and a half traveling, or sorry, we had traveled for a year before we moved to Tennessee. So we had sold everything in LA, decided to travel the world for a year together, which I'm so glad we had that time. I mean, it was really incredible. Um, and then we had moved to Tennessee, but we didn't have, I didn't have a normal job to go back to. I didn't have family or friends in Tennessee since we were new. There was no routine. We were about to like finish the house and leave. It just was, I just went home to an empty house and
Silence.
wailed,
Wailed.
just wailed. Yeah. And of course I called, of course I called his family. I even waited till the next day to call my own family. I couldn't call them. Um, so,
Because
um, it's, uh, I just, I don't think I wasn't ready, I think, to talk, to tell the news. It just didn't, it's surreal when that happens.
mm,
And, um, of course, I mean, I had to talk to his family. It, it's his siblings and his parents, but I wasn't ready to. I guess I was limiting. I only had so much, so much room to talk to people, I really relied on the community. Let's call it the community tree. So I spoke to his immediate family, his siblings, daughter, and parents. I did call one. I think I called my sister and let her take care of the rest of the family. And then I called like one of his best friends and said, you are my one person I'm calling right now. And if you can share it with others.
you asked him to do the sharing, but you also asked him to tell them not to call you, at least for a while.
Um, I didn't tell him not to have anyone call me. I just didn't have it in me to call everybody.
That's
I mean, over the course of uh the week, I think I was able to touch base with quite a few people. But no, I will say, it's an interesting thing when someone passes away, and I'm 100% been guilty of this up until now. Of when someone passes, we think like, let's give the loved ones space.
mhm,
I don't want to bother them.
right.
They're going through a lot right now. And at least for me, and I mean, I can't say it's the same for everyone, but that would have been the absolute worst thing for me,
That
for
is,
people to leave me alone and for people to give me space. The greatest thing for me was for people to call me and text me and tell me that they were there for me. And um, yeah, I'm not sure why in our culture it's like almost taboo to immediately reach out to someone when they're going through something difficult, but it was you know, it
that
felt good to have
is
people reaching out.
yet another one of the horrible rules that society, meaning everybody and nobody, places on ourselves that is stupid. And it's like,
Mm.
it doesn't make sense. Why would we do it? Well, because everybody says to do it, but it doesn't make any sense. Uh, and and that's, I think, there's huge value in getting that from you right now. I mean, that if we stopped now, this podcast would be a big success, only for you saying that.
Well, it was interesting. So after I have we had a really close group of friends in San Francisco, which included family also. So his brother and sister live in San Francisco. And then we had a very small group, maybe another like 5 people of um, just like our best friends. And after he passed away, the next morning, I flew to San Francisco. His daughter came out, and they have this in the Jewish religions. I think it's called like sitting Shiva, where after someone passes, you sit for, I'm not sure if it's 7 or 10 days, but we just sat together for a week. I think we were together for 7 days in one of my friend's houses, and we just loved on each other. We told stories, we laughed, we cried. There was no holding back emotions. And we sat and we ate food together, and it was the most beautiful way to mourn someone. I mean, I've lost loved ones before, and that was definitely the healthiest way to go through that at least immediate first part of losing someone.
Yeah. Yeah. Just the sitting. That's a question that is on the list is what should a person do? For example, I think I mentioned this to you when I first met you. I have a former uh, brother and sister-in-law. I lost the evil ex-wife that I was related to them through. Uh, but they had they had a daughter who was probably 3 or 4 when she died, and she didn't eat very well. Her routine for breakfast was Coke and bacon, and then for lunch it was Coke and whatever was a candy bar. Um,
Mhm.
she ate like that and not healthy. And then just one day randomly she was dead. And they just abused the heck out of themselves. They were sure that it was because they were horrible parents. Maybe that's true. Maybe it wasn't. Nobody knew. Um, the doctor had mercy on them and basically told them that it was unforeseen, unknowable, unknown why she died. And what they knew was that she died. Uh, so that's the setting. And so then, months and years go past, and I see this Dear Abby. I think most of the listeners won't even know what Dear Abby is, but she used to be a
I remember.
columnist, advisor. And I see this Dear Abby column on the fridge that says, "My kids who have died, you know, they existed. They're in my memory. They're still important to me. I think about them, and I don't want everybody to say nothing and pretend they never existed in order to avoid hurting my feelings or making me cry." So, and that's another one of those stupid society rules that just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But I read that and I'm like, all right, I'll honor her wishes. So I brought Kimmy up, and of course she was crying immediately. But I was like, but that's what you wanted. And my wife at the time, she goes, "Why did you bring her up?" Because that's what she wanted. Um, and it's okay to cry. It doesn't cost anybody anything. Uh,
No, no,
Nothing at all.
it's good to cry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I And now you're bringing up stories from me, and they all come from left field. I was at a soccer game just a few days ago where my grandson, who is 11, he got shellacked. I think the final score was about 60-0.
Oh, sure.
And so there were a couple of the 11-year-old boys who were crying. And that's what the coach focused on. "I don't want to see anybody crying around here." And I'm like,
Mm.
maybe you should be focusing on how you improve your football team and not
Mhm.
I don't want to see any tears. Uh,
Yeah.
Lost a little bit of respect there, but especially for men, that's how we're raised from an age much younger than 11. It's like tears are bad. You don't get to have tears. You don't get to
Yeah.
have any emotion, especially for men.
Yeah. And
So
it's supposed to, as opposed to like leaning into that feeling of, okay, yes, we're disappointed, and this is what disappointment feels like.
yeah, yeah, there's a
So
lot of positives
here's
that he
how we're
could have
gonna
taken
deal with
from
it.
that moment.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get crushed and it's okay. Sometimes you're the bug, sometimes you're the windshield. It's It'll happen both ways, and get used to it
Mhm.
and deal with it well. But that's I guess this podcast for me is in a major way it's about bagging on society because we don't have to follow those rules.
Mhm.
What did it feel like? Describe the moment when you were in the hospital and you were just told by the doctor that he's gone. What's going on in your gut, in your heart?
Um, I mean, the initial is def initially was just confusion. Like, no, I don't understand. Did you get him breathing yet? It was like, it took a minute to it just like it's not what was happening, you know. So I kept asking the nurse, like, how's he doing? So I think when he first held my hand and said they did everything they could, it still took a minute to understand, like, what does he mean by that? Like there's that scene in that movie, I'm sure, which everyone saw at the beginning of COVID with Matt Damon. I don't know if it's, I don't remember what it was called, but like when his wife first died, they tell him that his wife has passed away, and he's like, okay, so like, how's she doing? Can I see her yet? There's like that moment
Yeah.
of, you know, it doesn't, you can't, you don't digest it. But it's just surreal. I mean, to be honest, it's been 9.5 months and it's still surreal. It still feels like, um, at times can he get better and come back type of, like, he's
Uh,
not really gone. Um, and then there's tremendous guilt that, in my case, at least, I'm the one that started with the CPR. He had fainted a few days. So let me just, he passed by, I don't think I had said how he passed away. So he had a blood clot in his lungs that we didn't know about. And he'd had multiple blood clots in his lungs because he had um fainted a couple days before. And we talked about it. Like, should we go to the hospital? Because he had a blood clot like 4 or 5 years ago. That similar thing. He had fainted and went to the hospital, and they figured out he had a blood clot, and then they put him on blood thinners, and he was fine. Like 9 months later. So when he had fainted a few days prior to passing away, we talked about this, and he just blew it off and was like, oh, it was nothing. I was exerting myself, and I held my breath, and he was like laughing at the whole thing, like, oh, I'm so dumb, I can't believe I held my breath and made myself faint. um and was like adamant that he didn't need to go to the hospital. So when he had passed away, there was just like such a wave of guilt that also hit me. Like, I, shit, like, we didn't come to the hospital, and did I do CPR wrong? And I mean, with that night when I went home and was wailing, I mean, I think he passed away at like 4 p.m. And I think I was wailing until like 4 a.m. And I just kept saying, like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Like, I just felt like it was my fault. But I had therapy and spoke with the doctors, and I know there was nothing else I could have done, that it was his body's time, and he had these blood clots, and they were dislodging, and they weren't able to pass through his they were getting it got stuck in his arteries. There was nothing you could do.
were
But
they were they related to COVID, do you think?
they're not sure. I mean, they think that because he had atrial fibrillation, and he had been in the hospital over the last 10 years twice for it. And they think just over time, with the heart going out of rhythm, I guess that can cause a couple
AFib.
things happen. I guess it could cause like plaque to
Uh-huh.
also develop in the arteries, and then it's just this bad combination of going into AFib again. And I get that develops blood clots in your lungs. And then when you do exercise, it dislodges because now you have plaque in your arteries. It gets stuck in your arteries, and that's what made him faint. But then eventually it passed through. But you get a large enough blood clot, it won't pass through.
How well would you say you know him?
My husband, oh, we were like that amazing couple. We were we were good.
And you
I know
notice I
him
use the
we're
word
very
present tense. If he were to come back to you today, let's say
Mhm.
he sits down and joins us with a third microphone. I've got a third one on the
I
floor.
wish.
What would he say to you?
I think he would say that he was sorry, that I didn't need to be sorry. Yeah, I mean, I wish we could have just had like I mean, I've lost loved ones when we knew it was coming, like cancer or other illnesses, and you have that time to spend quality time and to talk about like life and death and to laugh and cry and hold on to each other. And I mean, we did say I love you and hold each other all the time. But I do wish we just had like a couple moments where we could have looked into each other's eyes and just like known what was happening. But I think he would say I love you, and I think he would actually be sorry that I mean we used to joke. We used to joke. He would say, 'cause he did like all the cooking and cleaning, and took such good care of me, and he was very supportive in supporting me in my career, and he used to say, that when we get older, he'll pass away after me because he was worried that I wouldn't be okay without him. So, yeah.
Would he, how would, if you were able to say, look, I've been feeling guilty for reasons X, Y, and Z, how would he respond?
Oh, I mean, he would definitely tell me that it's so stupid and that it was not my fault. And I do know that now. It just took me a while to get there. But yeah, it was it's his he would say it was my choice not to go to the hospital. It was, his choice not to, I don't know, have gone to see a doctor after he had COVID, even though he was one of the high risk people. And whether or not it caused it, I'm not saying it did, but it wouldn't have hurt to get checked out.
It
But
is
he would have said he's an
always
adult and he's in charge of himself, and it's not, he made his choices and it's not my fault.
true. Yeah, my wife, I couldn't drag her into a doctor's office with a team of horses. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, we still like to feel guilty, and there's 1,000 reasons to feel guilty after a death. I
I think, one thing you know, we do the best we can with the information we have in that moment.
Mhm.
And I'm okay. I'm at peace with that.
Yeah,
So, you know,
yeah,
that's okay.
that's that's kind of healthy of you. I uh I have some good friends who got on one of them who got on the podcast and was talking about a day when he found out that his daughter was both gay and suicidal. And being the man, he had nobody to talk to about that. He couldn't go to his wife. She was bearing the same burden. He couldn't add to her plate on that one. And he couldn't go to his daughter, of course, and say, man, this is a heavy load. He can't go to another woman, and he too afraid to go to another man. So it was him alone, with a burden that just can't be borne by a single human being alone. And she didn't commit suicide, but can you imagine the guilt that would occur, regardless of how good or bad a parent he was? And this is one of the world's best men. He's just one of the coolest guys on the planet. But whether or not that's the case, there would be so much guilt, and it would ruin your life. I want to phrase this question in the best way that I can. Um, what was your husband's name?
Cody.
How long would he want you to be wailing, to have your life shut down, and to not be able to do much other than cry?
Well, uh, how long? We actually used to talk quite a bit. We had had one of our best friends pass away 9 months before he passed away, and
Uh-huh.
we had talked quite a bit about what if one of us passes. But we were always he always would say he was going to live to be 104, so it wasn't going to be him.
Uh-huh.
But we had discussed, like, if I passed away, that what that like I said, just give it 9 months or 6 months before you at least date someone. But but that was more of like, it's just so crazy because at the time you're just like making jokes, but then when and I'm so far, but how long would he want me to be crying? I don't I don't know. I'm not I
Let's
mean,
reverse.
he wouldn't want me to ever be like debilitated and unable to live my life. He wouldn't want, you know, me to be doing that. But I mean, I'm at 9 months. Luckily I've had a life where I could create space for myself, and I didn't have to go back to a job. I didn't have to pick up my kids from school or take them to school the following week. So I decided I'm going to give myself at least. I told myself at the end of, I'm going to give myself no pressure to do anything for 6 months
Mhm.
before I think about my what's next, because I didn't have a job. I didn't have a permanent residence. I didn't. Those are things that I was going to have to figure out. And I said, I don't have to, I'm going to give myself 6 months before I have to figure it out. And so that's when I moved back in. I mean, at age 43, I moved back in with my parents. But I was able to give myself the space and time to say, you know what, just mourn. And I spent a lot of time outside. Utah is absolutely beautiful. So I went on a lot of hikes and spent time with some of my closest friends and laughed and cried and got an awesome therapist and just started working through it. And 6 months hit, and I definitely got nervous because I wasn't ready
Mhm.
to think about a job or to think about where I permanently wanted to live. Was I going to stay in Utah or not? So, even though he and I had like kind of said like, okay, we'll spend grieve for 6 months and then we can figure out life. But but I feel like I'm at 9. It's been about 9.5 months since he passed, and I just got this new job, and I feel like the world is starting to turn. And that was the right amount of time for me. But I think that's what's important is not rushing it, and what is the right amount of time for somebody, for
Right.
yourself.
So when somebody comes up to you and says, "Man, my husband just died. How long is he going to take me?"
I mean, it's gonna take I'll never, I mean, it'll be forever. I don't think he'll never be a huge part of my heart and soul. I mean, I'm never gonna not mourn him. I'm probably gonna cry every week for the rest of my life, but that's but that's okay. I mean, I look at those moments as times as I get as moments that I get to hold him close to my heart. So I'm not it's just that I'm not upset that I'm or frustrated that I'm still crying and I'm still heartbroken. I don't think there'll be a date when that ends. It's just becomes less and less and a little bit and more manageable. Um,
Right. Yeah.
that's what I say, is it just starts to become more manageable. And as my therapist says, like the rapids and the waterfalls of this river become less big and less crazy, but there will always be times that are difficult.
That's a good analogy, the rapids and the waterfalls. I used to have a diving inspection business. I would scuba dive into drinking water storage tanks, city tanks, and they would pay me a lot of money to do this. I would go down in the bottom and clean whatever was at the bottom of those storage tanks. And then one day I got a contract out on the Great Salt Lake where I needed to do an inspection underneath a bridge. So I had to buy a pontoon boat, and I went and found one. And I was talking to the guy, a single old man. He was probably 70 something. And, we somehow got talking about his wife who'd passed. And I asked him, how long has it taken you? Because it'd been a lot of years. I said, how long did it take you to get over her? And he paused and kind of looked down and choked back some tears. He says, I think about her every day.
Yeah.
And my reaction was, you lucky dude. Because I realized, and I said this to no one at the time, I said, I was like, if my wife at that time died, I wouldn't have mourned like that. And so, the argument is I guess that if you get somebody that you love and who loves you, man, even if that's for a week, uh, that's a gift.
Yeah.
Then I did kind of find somebody who was pretty awesome, by the way.
Good.
I was looking for someone who could love me, and I found that person, and happily ever after.
Good.
So it's doable.
It is. It's special having that person. I honestly think I don't think I'll ever have someone who like Cody. I'll never be loved like I was loved by Cody. We we were special and he was really special. And he loved so fiercely. Me, his friends, his family, life. He was a very curious and lovable, exciting person.
Yeah.
I had to do his memorial at a wedding facility because so many people were going to come.
Yeah.
It was, yeah, he was a really special person.
What? Let's give you a time machine.
Mhm.
Do you, should we put you in a Back to the Future type car? A
A
DeLorean?
DeLorean.
Yeah.
Only if Doc could be my co-pilot.
Yeah. Well, that's probably arrangeable. Okay, so you're in the DeLorean, Doc's in the passenger seat. He goes, okay, I know how to set this back to any date, any year.
Hmm.
What year are you going to go back to? You can only have one person in the room, and that person could be you, a younger
Mhm.
you. Who are you going to go back to, and what are you going to say? What question are you going to ask, or what are you going to tell them?
Oh, I definitely would go back with my husband. Um, Probably which version? In so 2021, we we had been like living on a sailboat. We decided my nephew had just passed away, who I was very close with, and we said life is precious. We love each other. What are we doing? Just working, grinding away, and we shut it down. We sold everything and decided we're going to travel around the world and be together. And I would go back to one of those times. It was a really special time. And we were so close and just really, um, I guess, present in our life about what we were doing, why we were doing it. what was important to us. So I go back to a moment during that year and somewhere really cool. We went to a lot of cool places. So I could like revisit Indonesia with my husband, sitting in a cabana looking at awesome waves. Like maybe that would be the moment I go back to.
Indonesia. Yeah, that's kind of remote. Did you do that in a sailboat, just around that area?
No, we sold the boat. We considered whether we want our boat was definitely not seaworthy enough to go around the world. So we
Okay,
decided to sell it and bop around the world by just flying instead. But
that's kind of inspiring because it's almost like somebody guided or got guided on, let's live life while we have each other around.
yeah.
Because for me, I mean, I've been nose to the grindstone all of my life, and there's been the occasional trip to, I don't know, places, but nothing that awesome.
Yeah,
And
and we did it because we knew like life is precious. I mean, at the time when we left, we were 41 and we said we're young, we feel like we're young at 41 or felt like we were young at
oh, you're
41
young.
and we're like there's now's the time for us to do adventures we might not want to do when we're older.
Hmm.
So we I mean we were surfing, we were in Tahiti, Indonesia. Indonesia surfing. We went and like did safari in Africa and hiked to see the gorillas. We went to the Middle East, spent a month in a camper van in Europe. I mean, we just whatever we could think of, we did it. It was like the no holds bar year. Um, we went to 14 countries and just really went all out.
I did the world's weakest version of what you did. So while you were going to Indonesia and Israel, I was going to the closest A&W that I could get to with my dad. Um, for me, I knew that there would be a guilt thing after he died, and so I was doing my best to avoid dealing with that guilt. My way of doing that is because I'm around everywhere all the time, and so when I was anywhere near Orem, uh, I'd stop by his house, and I didn't honestly convicting myself. I didn't want to take him to a big restaurant because that would be too much time, too much distance, and my primary motivation was just to avoid the guilt. But he liked an A&W that was about a mile away, and so we'd go there, and he always ordered their hamburger and then spit on my food because he had bad dentures, and it was painful. I had to eat food that had been spit on repeatedly. Uh, Can't say I loved it, but I spent enough time with him that I was successful in avoiding the guilt of, you should have done more, you could have had more time with him, you suck because now he's gone. I avoided all that. I'm grateful for that. So I think it's just ironic that you did things in a grand way and I did things in the most minimalist way ever. Uh, but I'm grateful, and I think you are, that you had that time.
Yeah. It's holding the people you love close to your heart as much as you can. I mean, I realize that obviously my situation, not everyone can do to say time life is precious, let's take off for a year. Luckily we had saved and we could figure it out
Hmm.
to do that. But that was our intent. I mean, we were conscious of life is precious. Like let's not just enjoy each other, but let's also do these things that are so easy to push off that you say, oh, one day I'll go do safari in Africa, or, you know, one day we'll go do I don't know, go surf in Tahiti or something. So we just felt like, let's do it now.
I've listened to
It's
Dave
too.
Ramsey a lot, and sorry, Dave, for picking on you, but you're right most of the time. Um, I believe, and I'm putting words in his mouth, I know that, but I believe that his message is sacrifice now, and then you can go to Tahiti when you're 60. That wouldn't have worked for you.
No, no, that was not my mantra or my husband's. Not that we were irresponsible. We still worked hard and still had good careers. But yeah, I don't subscribe to that mindset of just put your head down now and figure it out later.
Mhm.
Because as we see, like we all lose loved ones at young ages. And I mean, for me, I think it's important to spend the quality time with the people we love, when we can.
Right. And for those who are listening who are like, I'm 100 air. I can't go to the next city without denting my bank account.
Mhm.
Um, there are ways. I my wife, she quality time for her is one of her five, is probably her biggest love language. And
Mhm.
so for her, that means because we're both entrepreneurs, our day ends at 8:30 or 9. And so then I'm hers and she's mine, and we will go watch something on Netflix together.
Yeah. The
And
snuggle.
yeah,
That's like the greatest quality time. Yeah, you don't need to go on a big adventure, but I mean that counts.
it's awesome when you can.
Yeah.
I kind of envy you guys. Do you believe it just seems more than coincidental that um you had that year of super duper quality time, and he had the motivation to make it happen before he died young. Do you think that was a God thing?
Oh, I think it was a God thing. Um,
Have you considered that?
no, I have not.
Uh-huh.
I'm not. I mean, he definitely, you could ask any one of his friends, family, frankly, you could ask any Uber driver that had him in the car. He was a man that lived life in the moment and lived life to the fullest.
Uh-huh.
So I think we just both were on that. We're just both that type of person.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know, maybe there's something there. I will say too that last 9 months, so we had done that, came back, and we were home for about 9 months before he passed. And I had mentioned how he was traveling about half the time and only with me about half the time during those 9 months. But the way his work was taking him around the country, it was like he was on a friend tour. So he also, during those last 9 months, had spent time with so many of his friends. And so when he passed and I was at the memorial, everybody had, the story of the last time they were with Cody, and it was within the last year or within the last 9 months. So it was a little ironic how we had our incredible time together in our year of just the bucket list year, quite literally. And then he had all that quality time with his family or friends and family as well. So,
What does your present, let's take yesterday.
okay.
Um, I don't know necessarily want to know as much what tasks you did as
Mhm.
what was going on in your mind and your heart and your gut. What did yesterday look and feel like to you?
Hmm. Well, um, actually, one of Cody's best friends just came to town. His brothers came today.
Uh-huh.
So we're all spending the weekend together. Um, so it was really nice to have his best friend come into town. So it actually was like a big Cody day yesterday for
Uh-huh.
me. Um, and then at the end of the day, I even like I'll talk to Cody at the end of the day and kind of not every night, but not every night anymore. But tonight I did talk to him last night and just fill him in on how we were all getting together.
Do you
Um,
believe that he's there?
I got I I I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not a religious person.
Uh-huh.
So, I, but he's there in my heart.
Mhm.
Whether there's an actual spirit or what have you, I'm not sure because I'm like I said, I'm not a religious person, but he is there in my heart. So I'm talking to my Cody
Uh-huh.
that I hold inside of me, and that's good enough for me. That makes me feel better talking to him. But so there was that part. It was a Cody day for me. But a good one, not a curled up in a ball crying day. It was a filled with love, telling a couple stories, wonderful day with with Cody's friend. And then also having um I'm making choices that are for the future, and which I haven't been making any choices for 9 months about any future. But as I've met you, decided I'm going to remodel this house. So it feels good to make choices. Like I'm putting in new windows. I'm going to tear down a wall. So I'm making choices that are about a future. I bought a season's pass to ski. I mean, these are decisions that might seem trivial in a regular person's life, but like I haven't made any decisions about anything in the future for a while now. And it feels good to have my world start turning again, where there is a future that I can start to plan for and make decisions for.
Do you think he would agree that that it's a good time for that it's he wants you to start making decisions and moving forward?
Um, I th- I think so. It feels I'm still moving slow,
Uh-huh. You're
but
going at your rate.
it's a pace I'm comfortable with.
Awesome.
So,
That's kind of a perfect answer. What is the difference between a good Cody day and a bad Cody day when you're crying and fetal on the floor and
yeah,
washing mopping the floor with tears? What
yeah,
makes
that's
one day good and what makes one day not great?
um I being home alone is hard. I don't have a lot of them, to be honest. I mean, I've spent like the last 3 months kind of traveling. If a friend invites me to something, I'm in.
Mhm.
But or being home alone, that's when the day, it's, those are the harder days. And, I mean, I still haven't gone through any of his things.
Mhm.
So, days where I think, oh, maybe I'll start to because I packed everything from Tennessee and brought it back. So days where I think, oh, maybe today I'll go through one of the boxes and I'm home alone. It's like a terrible combination. So, but I'm actually, I don't get too many of those in the last 3 weeks. I should say, sorry. I've just started to make a turn where it's manageable now. Like I'm doing okay. Having loved ones around, or even if someone calls,
Uh-huh.
then then that helps. I mean, just someone reaching out, hey, how you doing? Having a nice phone call.
When somebody does come over, do you want them to talk about him?
I mean, I don't, yes, absolutely. And I don't need it to be the whole conversation, but it's not taboo. It's not okay. It is precious to be able to have, I mean, spend a whole hour talking about him and us and our life. And so thank you for that space to be able to do that.
You know, there are any number of couples where one of them dies and the other one is alone. And you represent every one of those to me. People are going to listen to this podcast and go, what can I learn from Chaco that I can't ask my friend who is now single? So you've provided that guidance. It is okay to talk about the deceased spouse. And I'm going to interject. I don't have any boundaries. He's around. He loves you. He's there. And I love you.
Thank you.
And thank you.
I really, really appreciate the space for us to be talking about it.
Hey, thank you for listening to this Manalizing podcast. I appreciate it. You know, I don't go hunting for men with big stories and big issues to deal with. I find that pretty much any man that I talk to, he's going to have a story. If you're inspired by what you hear, here's my invitation. Join us. Join Manalizing. Manalizing.com. Lift and be lifted. Help other men and allow other men to help you. Let's do this together. We look forward to meeting you. Manalizing.com.